Hello everyone, welcome to Michigan Man MTG, and we've got a lot of previews for you today. It's Tuesday and we got a massive card dump today. But before we dive into the previews, remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Final Fantasy preview season and beyond. Alright, so let's dive into today's previews. First is Memories Returning for 2 and 2 blue mana. You get a sorcery. You get to reveal the top 5 cards of your library, put one of them in your hand, then choose an opponent. They put one on the bottom of your library, then you put one into your hand, then they put one on the bottom of your library, and put the other into your hand. So this is an interesting spell. So it's basically draw 3, but your opponent gets to pick 2 out of the 5 cards to put on the bottom of your library. So you'll get the best one and the third best card from the cards that you're going to see. So I think in limited, definitely I would play this because it's going to help you, because whatever the best card in that 5 cards is, you're going to be able to keep. And then you're going to be able to get some other cards as well. And it does have flashback for 7 and 2 blue mana. So potentially you could do it a second time. Not sold on this in standard, because I think Stock Up is just a better card for you, where you get to look at 5 cards and you get to choose the 2 that you're getting for only 3 mana. So I think it's competing in the same slot. And I think Stock Up is just a little bit better. Next, we've got Winmu, White Mage for 3 and 2 white mana. You can legendary creature that's a human cleric and is a 3/3 with vigilance and lifelink. And whenever you gain life, put a +1/+1 counter on each cleric you control. So this is obviously designed to be in a Clerics Matters deck. We do have a lot of decent clerics currently in standard, so it's possible we could see a clerics deck. But given that this is 5 mana, if it was like 3 mana, I think it would be very, very playable. But at 5, I think it's going to be probably more of a card you play in limited than it is in standard. Next, we've got Sefer Almacy for 3 and a red mana. You can legendary creature that's a human knight and a 3/4. And whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains double strike until end of turn. And it has Fire Cross. Whenever Sefer Almacy deals combat damage to a player, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. So this is kind of an interesting way. If you have trample on Sefer Almacy, then you get to go ahead and recast a spell from your graveyard every time he does combat damage to a player. So in theory, you could do this twice on the same turn, because if he's the only one on the board or he's the only attacking creature, he gets double strike under those circumstances, and then you maybe hit it with a monstrous rage, and now he's got trample, and he's able to do some combat damage as part of the first strike effect, and then on the main combat damage phase he does additional damage. So not only would you get one activation, you get a second activation, and that potentially could be all you need to win the game. So I think this has a chance to be a very good card in standard. We'll just have to see what pieces we need to build around it. Alright, those were the only rares we had for the day, so not much in the terms of rares, but we did get a large uncommon and common dump. So I'm going to try to go through these quickly and kind of give you an idea of, hey, is this something that's limited playable, not limited playable, or does it have any standard playability? So the first is Delivery Mowgli for 3 and a white mana. You get a Mowgli. That's a 3/2 with flying, and when this creature enters the battlefield, search your library and or your graveyard for an artifact card with mana value 2 or less, reveal it, and put it into your hand. If you search your library this way, shuffle. So in limited, I think this is a really good way to go get artifacts from your library. It's not as good as some of the other abilities that we've seen on a couple of other cards to go get artifacts out of your deck, so I think this is probably a limited playable only. Alright, next we've got Granatia For 4 and a white mana, you get a legendary creature that's a cat archer and is a 3/5 with reach, with a leg and eye. Whenever one or more other creatures and or artifacts you control die, you get to draw a card. This ability activates only once each turn. So interesting card here. Probably, again, only limited playable. We're not going to see it in Standard. Next, we've got Ilmeg Pixie for 1 and a blue mana. You get a fairy, that's a 2/1 with flying. And whenever this creature attacks, you get to surveil 1. So I think this is certainly limited playable and might have an outside chance of seeing a little bit of Standard play because of that surveillability on it. Being able to surveil every time it attacks and basically sculpt the top of your library, I think, is a good ability in Standard, and that might be enough for it to see some Standard play. Next, we've got Travel the Overworld for 5 and 2 blue mana. You get a sorcery with affinity for towns, meaning this spell costs 1 less to cast for each town you control, and you draw 4 cards. So this is, a card payoff for our town deck that looks like it's going to be in green and blue. So I think this is an easy include in that deck, but outside of that deck, I don't think it'll see any play. Next, we've got Thief's Knight for 2 and a blue mana. You get an artifact, that's an equipment with Job Select. And the equipped creature gets +1/+1, has whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and is a rogue in addition to its other types, and its equip cost is 4. So I think this is definitely a playable card in Standard if we do have, again, that equipment style deck, because when you do combat damage to your opponent and you get to draw a card every time with no discard effect, I think that's certainly good enough to see Standard play, and I would definitely want it in Limited. Next, we've got Swallowed by Leviathan for 2 and a blue mana. You get an instant. Choose target spell, surveil 2, then counter the chosen spell unless a controller pays 1 for each card in your graveyard. So I think this is actually a Standard playable counter spell. Particularly in decks that are looking to get lots of cards into the graveyard anyways, and being able to surveil 2 means the worst case scenario is that you would put 2 cards in your graveyard and your opponent would have to pay 2 additional mana. But if you play this late in the game where you've already got 4 or 5 cards in your graveyard, then it's probably almost a counter spell at that point for 3 mana. And I think getting to surveil on top of that is a decent ability. So definitely limited playable and has some outside chance of seeing Standard play. Next, we've got Demon Wall for 1 and a black mana. You get an artifact creature that's a Demon Wall and is a 3/3 with Defender. It has Menace. This creature cannot be blocked except by 2 or more creatures. As long as this creature has a counter on it, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. And for 5 and a black mana, you can put 2 +1/+1 counters on this creature. So this is an interesting card in my opinion because we've got a demon deck in Standard right now that's in black, and this is another 2 mana demon that you can add to that deck. So you could play this on turn 2 and then Unholy Annex on turn 3. And then all of a sudden, instead of taking 2 damage from the Unholy Annex activation, you gain 2 life and your opponent loses 2 life. So I think this has got an outside chance of seeing some Standard play in that particular deck. Next, we've got Dark Knight's Great Sword for 2 and a black mana. You get an artifact that's an equipment with Job Select. Equipped creature gets +3/+0 and is a knight in addition to its other types. And it has Chaos Bringer, equip, pay 3 life, activate only once each turn. So I like the fact that, if the creature, the Job Select hero token gets killed, then you can attach this to another creature for 3 life. And I think in black, because black, doesn't seem to mind doing damage to itself, I think this is very playable in Standard. Next, we've got Opera Love Song for 1 and a red mana. You get an instant, and you get to choose 1. Exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play those cards until your next end step, or 1 or 2 target creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn. So I like this because it gives some flexibility to our normal card draw ability in red, where we're exiling a couple cards. Usually that's at sorcery speed. So the fact that this is at instant speed, I like. So you can play it on your opponent's turn, or you can use it as a combat trick if the coast is clear, in essence, and you can get those extra points of damage in. So I like this for standard, and I definitely like it for limited. Next, we've got Random Encounter for 4 and 2 red mana. You get a sorcery. Shuffle your library, then mill 4 cards. Put each creature card milled this way onto the battlefield. They gain haste. At the end of the next end step, return those creatures to their owner's hand. And for flashback cost of 6 and 2 red mana. So this is a wild card. For 6 mana, in essence, you're playing roulette, in essence, where you're hoping you hit right, and you hit 4 creature cards, and you get to put 4 creatures on the battlefield at that point. Or it could be one of those really feel bad cards where you shuffle, mill 4 cards, and those 4 cards are not creatures, and you end up milling, and spending that 6 mana and getting nothing with it. And because of that, I don't think it's going to be playable in standard. In limited, though, I feel better about it in limited, simply because you're likely to hit more creatures there, because you're playing with a higher concentration generally of creatures in limited than you are in standard. So I like it there as a potential, hey, maybe play this when on that turn situation for you. Next, we've got Sandworm for 4 and a red mana. You get a creature that's a worm and is a 5/4 with haste. When this creature enters the battlefield, destroy target land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. This is interesting, and the reason is this is destroy target land. It does not specify what kind of land. So maybe, for example, your opponent in standard is playing a deck that only has 1 basic land in it, and you kill their basic land. Well, they can't go get a basic at that point, so they just lose the land. So I like it from that standpoint. Again, 5 mana though in standard, in red, probably is too much, but I do like the abilities on it in limited, especially because you can kill their dual land with it, or if they only have 1 source of a particular color, you might be able to kill that as well. So I like it for limited. Unexpected Request for 2 and a red mana. You get a sorcery where you gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature, it gains haste until end of turn. You may attach an equipment you control to that creature. If you do, unattach it at the beginning of the next end step. Okay, and then obviously you're going to gain control of it only to the end of the turn, so the equipment isn't going with the creature to your opponent. I like this. This is our typical spell where 3 mana cost, gain control of one of your opponent's creatures for a turn. And in limited, I think it's okay. Probably won't see play in standard. Next, we've got Choco Comet for X and 2 red mana. You get a sorcery, and Choco Comet deals X damage to any target. Create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters the battlefield. This token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So it's a nice ability to creating the bird token, in essence, for 2 mana. And then the rest of the mana you can spend on hitting any target with it. So I think in a go wide deck where you're putting, a lot of lands into play, then I like this for that deck, because it can be a way to do direct damage to your opponent or a big creature they have. So definitely in limited, I'm playing this. Standard, I think, has some playability potentially if we do have a bird stack. Next, we've got Colosseum Behemoth for 5 and 2 green mana. You get a beast. That's a 7/7 with trample. And when this creature enters the battlefield, choose 1, destroy target artifact or enchantment, or draw a card. I like it for limited. It won't see any standard play. Next, we've got a side quest in Raise a Chocobo for 1 and a green mana. you get an enchantment. And when this enchantment enters the battlefield, you get to create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters the battlefield. This token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. And then at the beginning of your first main phase, if you control 4 or more birds, transform this enchantment. And when you do, you get Black Chocobo, which is a bird, and it's a 2/2. And when this permanent transforms into Black Chocobo, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. It has landfall, and whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, birds you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. So I think this is a card that was meant to go into a Chocobo deck. We know that Wizards of the Coast and their design for the set intended for there to be a Chocobo deck. Now, whether that's going to be standard playable or not, we'll have to see. But if it is, this is a card that'll find that deck. Next, we've got Chocobo Racetrack for 3 and 2 green mana. You get an artifact with landfall, and whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, you get to create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters the battlefield. This token gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Probably will not see any standard play because it's 5 mana. In limited, though, it'll be a good card in the mid to late game, and it will be a way of creating a creature every time you play a land, and I think that's good enough in limited to be a potentially prime card to pick up in limited formats. Next, we've got Diamond Weapon for 7 and 2 green mana. You get a legendary artifact creature that's an elemental and is an 8/8, and this spell costs 1 less to cast for each permanent card in your graveyard. So this is a card that goes in a Graveyard Matters deck. It also has reach and immune, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt to Diamond Weapon. So very good card in a graveyard strategy because it is probably going to cost you at most 2 mana based on how many cards you're going to have in your graveyard. And I like that in limited, definitely, but I also like it in standard. I think this does have standard playability, especially in a deck that's going to be playing instants and sorceries and other spells that are going to end up in the graveyard that are beyond creatures dying in combat, or it's in a Delirium deck, and I think the Delirium deck may be where this is well positioned to be in. Can you imagine this? 2 mana, 8/8, and you can potentially play it on turn 3 or 4, which I think would be a really, really great addition to that deck. Next, we've got Cloud of Darkness for 2, a black and 2 green mana. You get a legendary creature that's an avatar and is a 3/3 with flying, and it has Particle Beam. When Cloud of Darkness enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So play this for 5 mana, hopefully kill something on the opponent's side. When you do, a good limited card, probably won't see any standard play. Next, we've got Rufus Shinra for 1, a white and a black mana. You get a legendary creature that's a human noble and is a 2/4. Whenever Rufus Shinra attacks, if you don't control a creature named Darkstar, create Darkstar, a legendary 2/2 white and black dog creature token. So limited playable, probably isn't going to see play in standard, but maybe does have an outside chance of it because maybe this goes in a sacrifice deck because you attack with Rufus Shinra and you create the token and you then sacrifice the token and get that activated ability of that or triggered ability of the creature dying. And then on the next turn you attack again and you get to recreate it. So I think maybe in that style of deck where you're going to be continually sacrificing Darkstar, then it might make some sense in standard. In limited, I think it's a good card. Next, we've got Giat, King of the Dwarfs for a red and a white mana. You get a legendary creature that's a dwarf noble and is a 1/1 with double strike. And whenever Giat or another dwarf you control enters the battlefield, And whenever an equipment you control enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So nice filtering ability in limited, and I think that's probably where we're going to see this find a home, is in limited decks, because it's going to have that double strike ability. And if you have a way to put equipment on this and give it greater power and toughness, or put in equipment that has trample as an ability on it, I think Yacht then will be a good limited card. And possibly in our Boros equipment deck, this might be a card that you might have a copy or two of. Next, we've got Ring of Lucy. For 4 mana, you get a legendary artifact, and it taps for 2 colorless mana, and you can pay 2 and pay 1 life and tap target non-land permanent. So nice ability to tap down one of your opponent's either creatures or something else on their side that's got maybe an activated ability that requires to be tapped. You can just tap it down. So I like that ability a lot on this. And 4 mana to get 2 mana, that's not an awful rate in limited, certainly. And potentially, there might be a deck in standard that would want this. Maybe even the Azorius Simulacrum Synthesizer deck, because this would be a source of additional mana that you could pump into Reclamation Bay, and because of that, it might be worth it, and it would trigger the synthesizer when it does come into play. So maybe it's got an outside chance of a copy seeing some play there. Next, we have Eden, Seat of the Sanctum. It's a land and a town, and it taps for colorless mana. And for 5 mana, you can mill 2 cards. Then you may sacrifice this land. When you do, return another target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand. So nice ability on a land where you can get something out of your graveyard and bring it back to your hand, as long as it's a permanent. So maybe your opponent kills your best creature. You've got this in your deck, and it's a way to go ahead and grab it out of there. But I'm not sure if it'll see much, if any, standard play, because it's just too iffy in terms of the playability of it. You've got to kind of have things set up in your graveyard to do that. Now, in a graveyard strategy deck, I'd probably have a copy of this so I could mill some more stuff into the graveyard. And the nice thing is you may sacrifice this land, so it's not you have to sacrifice the land. So you could use it for 5 mana, which is a high cost to mill some cards, but it'd be another way to mill things into the graveyard. Next, we have Crossroads Village. It's a land and a town, and this land enters tapped. As it enters, choose a color, and then it taps to add 1 mana of the chosen color. This is going to be a standard playable card. I know it's a common, but this is going to be standard playable. And the reason that it's going to be standard playable is right now in standard, we've got a lot of lands that are going to rotate come August, and this is at least temporarily a land that can replace them. Now, the downside of it is it will enter tap, but that's probably okay given the need to have a mana of a particular color. Maybe you're trying to play a 3-color deck and you've got a couple copies of this in there, and this is going to represent whatever that 3rd color of mana that you need is. So I think there's a place for it in standard. Next, we've got Arith's Rescue Mission for 3 and a white mana. You get a sorcery, and you get to choose 1. Take the elevator, create 3 1/1 colors hero creature tokens, take 59 flights of stairs, tap up to 3 target creatures, put a stun counter on 1 of them. So limited playable, probably not going to see any standard play. I do kind of see possibly an outside chance of it seeing play in an Elspeth deck, because we know that what Elspeth does is it doubles the number of tokens that you create. So this would create 6 1/1 hero tokens. So under that circumstance, I think it's got maybe a little bit of standard play, but otherwise it's for limited only. Next, we've got Galley Cat. For 2 and a white mana, you get a creature that's a cat and is a 1/3. It has flying and vigilance, and as long as you control 2 or more artifacts, this creature gets +2, +0. So it's a 3/3 if you've got 2 artifacts. Limited playable. I don't think we'll see it in standard. Next, we've got Stuck in Summoner Sanctum for 2 and a blue mana. You get an enchantment. That's an aura with flash, and you enchant artifact or creature. When this aura enters, tap enchanted permanent. Enchanted permanent doesn't untap during its controller's untap step, and its activated abilities can't be activated. So this is a way to shut off a Simulacrum Synthesizer or any good creature in standard. And I like that ability because this is 3 mana, but we usually don't get this kind of quality for this kind of card when we see it in blue, because this is almost in every set we see something pretty similar to this for around 3 mana. So this one's a little bit better. Certainly limited playable as a removal card for a creature, and maybe it has some standard playability if we see a lot of artifacts in standard. Next, we've got Rook Turret for 3 and a blue mana. You get an artifact creature that's a construct and is a 3/3 with flying. And whenever another artifact you control enters the battlefield, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. Limited playable, but outside of that, I don't think it'll see standard play. Next, we've got Magic Dampener for a blue mana. You get an instant, and target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains hexproof until end of turn, and you get to untap it. So this could be used as a way of, untapping a creature so that you can play it in essence as a combat trick to block something unexpectedly, or you can simply use it as a protection spell. And for those reasons, I feel standard playable, definitely. And certainly in limit, I would want this. And maybe this goes into the Boros Prowess deck as a way of giving a buff to a creature, but also giving hexproof, because maybe you wait until your opponent has made a decision that they're going to target something on your side, and then you play this to protect it. Or your opponent on their turn goes to tries to kill one of your creatures in combat with a spell, and now you are going to be able to untap it, protect it from that spell, and give it +1/+1, and that may be enough for it to be able to beat something in combat. So I like this card. I think it's standard playable. Next, we have Scorpion Sentinel for 1 and a blue mana. You get an artifact creature that's a robot scorpion and is a 1/4. As long as you control 7 or more lands, this creature gets +3/+0. Limited playable only. Next, we've got Corner by Black Mages for 1 and 2 black mana. You get a sorcery. Target opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. Okay, so a black removal spell at the common slot. And you get to create a 0/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. So I think it's going to be a very good removal spell in limited, and getting to create that black wizard creature token is nice. So limited playable, probably not going to see standard play though. Next we have Ahriman for 2 and a black mana. You get an Eye Horror, that's a 2/2 with flying and death touch, and for 3 mana you can sacrifice another creature or artifact and draw a card. And that may be relevant in limited, because if you've got a creature that is going to die in combat anyways, and they're not going to kill the other creature, and you've got 3 mana open, well, you can sacrifice a creature to draw a card, which I think is relevant in limited. Next, we've got Quatrub Fourier for 2 and a black mana. You get a zombie horror, that's a 3/2, and when this creature enters the battlefield, you get to choose 1, destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn, or exile up to 2 target cards from a single graveyard. Again, I think this is limited playable, but we probably won't see it in standard. Next, we've got Hecked Eyes for 1 and a black mana. You get an Ooze Horror, that's a 1/1. And whenever this creature enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. And we see cards that are very similar to this. It seems like every other set. So it's going to be limited playable. And if we do have a truly dedicated discard deck, it might see some play there as well in Standard. Next, we've got Resentful Revelation for 1 and a black mana. You get a sorcery, and you can look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard, and it's got Flashback for 6 and a black mana. So this is definitely limited playable, and if you're playing a graveyard strategy, I think it's even playable in Standard in that type of deck, because you get to put 2 cards into the graveyard and you get to get 1 back for only 2 mana. And we see spells in green that do this, but it has to be, a particular type of card, whether it's a land or a permanent, that would have to come out of the graveyard because of the requirement on the card. This one just allows you to choose whatever card you want, okay, which I think is nice. So I think it's going to see some Standard play. And definitely I would want it in limited, because I can, look at the top 3 cards and I can choose the one that makes the most sense given the board state. Next, we've got Mysidian Elder for 2 and a red mana. You get a human wizard. That's a 1/3. And whenever this creature enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 black wizard creature token with whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. So 3 mana for 2 bodies. In limited, definitely a good card. And if we do have a deck that is built around these black wizard creature tokens, then I think this is a fine addition to that. Next, we've got Red Mage's Rapier for 1 and a red mana. You get an artifact. That's an equipment. It's got Job Select. An equipped creature has, whenever you cast a non-creature spell, this creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn, and is a wizard in addition to its other types. So definitely limited playable, and I think there's an outside chance of it seeing Standard play. The equip cost is high at 3, but maybe you play it and early in the game you're attacking with the 1/1 colorless hero token and casting spells as you go, and when that finally dies, then you put it on something that has flying or something that has higher toughness, and now it becomes a creature that's similar then to Slick Shot Show Off, where it gets that +2 every time you cast a non-creature spell. And that card has been very, very popular in Standard. So I think this ability may be better than we think it is. Certainly limited, playable, and I think there's an outside chance of it seeing some Standard play. Next, we have Sabu Tender for 1 and a red mana. You get a plant. That's a 2/1 with reach, and it has landfall. Whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent. And if we do have a dedicated landfall deck in Standard, this, along with our Lizard from the Bloomburrow set, make a great combination, because every time you're playing a land, you're doing damage to your opponent. So I like that if those two could pair together in a landfall strategy that would cause your opponent just to lose life because you're playing lands. Especially if you got ways to put multiple lands into play on a given turn. Limited, I think it's good because it's going to give some additional damage to your opponent across the course of a game. And because of that, I think definitely limited playable, and maybe has some fringe Standard playability. Next, we've got Thunder Magic for a red mana. You get an instant with a tiered ability. If you just play it for Thunder, it doesn't cost you any additional mana, and it does 2 damage to a target creature. If you choose Turndara for 3 mana, Thunder Magic deals 4 damage to target creature, or Tundanga for 5 and a red mana, Thunder Magic deals 8 damage to target creature. I like the flexibility of this to target a creature, so I would not say this is a main deck playable card in Standard, but maybe because of the flexibility of it, it could see some sideboard action in Standard if we have a lot of really large creatures and we need some flexibility on how to kill those. But 7 mana to deal 8 damage is a lot of mana to sink into one spell, so probably not going to see more than limited play. for the most part. Next, we have Blazing Bomb for a red mana. You get an elemental, that's a 1/1, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell, if at least 4 mana was spent to cast it, put a +1/+1 counter on this creature, and it has Blow Up. You can sacrifice this creature and it deals damage equal to its power to target creature, and you can only activate that as a sorcery. Limited playable, definitely. And if we had a big spell deck, maybe it could see some play there. But outside of that, it's just a limited card. Next, we've got Call of the Mountain Chocobo for 3 and a red mana. You get a sorcery. First, you get to search your library for a mountain card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. And then you get to create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters the battlefield. This token gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and it's got flashback for 5 and a red mana. So this is limited playable, won't see any standard play. Next, we've got Hill Gigas for 4 and 2 red mana. You get a giant, that's a 5/4 with trample and haste and mountain cycling. And it won't see any standard play, but I think it'll be a good card in limited because that mountain cycling ability can get you a mountain if you get it early in the game, and then late in the game it's a card you can play, it immediately can attack, and that trample may be just what you need to win the game. Next, we've got Airship Crash for 2 and a green mana. You get an instant where you destroy target artifact, enchantment, or creature with flying, and its cycling cost is 2. So this is a decent spell in limited. I wish it cost 2 mana. If it did, then it would be standard playable, but because it's not going to see any standard play. Next, we've got Bard's Bow for 2 and a green mana. You get an artifact, that's an equipment with job select. An equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has reach and is a bard in addition to its other types. And it has Perseus's bow for its equip cost of 6. And because of the equip cost here, I don't think it's going to see much play in standard, because if you're able to kill the hero token, then it's probably just a dead card on the field. 3/3 for 3 in limited is a decent rate, so I think there it's fine. Next, we have Chocobo Kick for 1 and a green mana. You get a sorcery with Kicker. Return a land you control to its owner's hands. And what it means is you may return a land you control to its owner's hand in addition to any other cost as you cast this spell. And target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature an opponent controls. If this spell was kicked, the creature you control deals twice that much damage instead. So nice way to double down on the damage. Definitely limited playable as a removal spell in green, and may have a little bit of outside chance of seeing some standard play. Next, we've got Gizal Greens for 1 and a green mana. You get a sorcery and you get to create a 2/2 green bird creature token with whenever a land you control enters the battlefield, this token gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and it has flashback of 6 and a green mana. So again, something that could be paid in the Chocobo deck or bird deck, but outside of that, I don't think it's going to see any standard play. In limited, again, because of the landfall ability, it'll be a decent spell. Next, we have Giganton Tord for 3 and a green mana. You get a frog, that's a 4/4, and as long as you control 7 or more lands, this creature gets +2/+2. So limited playable, won't see any play beyond that. Next, we've got Gubu Gardener for 1 and a green mana. You get a plant beast, that's a 1/3. And you can tap it to add mana. So definitely a creature that will be played in limited. I don't think it sees standard play, but maybe it does have an outside chance of seeing some play because it has 3 toughness, and that might matter in standard. Next, we have Grand Pulse Ochu for a green mana. You get a plant beast, that's a 1/1 with death touch, And for 8 mana until end of turn, this creature gets +1/+1 for each permanent card in your graveyard. Limited playable, or possibly playable in a graveyard strategy deck, but I don't even think there's going to see standard play. Next, we've got the Proper Right Scout for 2 and a green mana. You get a Rabbit Scout, that's a 3/2. And whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, this creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. I wish it had Trample, because then it would be a really good card. But it has an outside chance of seeing standard play if we have a dedicated Rabbits deck. And we did have a lot of Rabbits from Bloomburrow and some other sets before that. So maybe this is a card that could fit into that strategy. Next, we've got Iron Giant for 7 mana. You get an artifact creature that's a demon and is a 6/6 with Vigilance, Reach, and Trample. So very vanilla creature, limited playable, won't see play outside of that. Next, we have Adventurer's Airship for 3 mana. You get an artifact that's a vehicle and is a 3/2 with flying. And whenever this vehicle attacks, you get to draw a card and then discard a card, and its crew cost is 2. So limited playable. I don't see it as a standard playable card. Next, we've got Lunatic Pandora for 1 mana. You get a legendary artifact. For 2 mana, you can tap it and surveil 1, and for 6 mana, you can tap it and sacrifice it and destroy target non-land permanent. Limited playable, but probably won't see any standard play. And our last card of the day, I believe, is Monk's Fist. For 2 mana, you get a artifact that's an equipment, and it has Job Select. An equipped creature gets +1/+0 and is a monk in addition to its other types, and the equip cost is 2. Again, probably just limited playable. All right, that's Tuesday's common and uncommon dump from Final Fantasy. We'll get the last of the cards on Wednesday and Thursday. So thanks for staying to the end of the video. And remember to like and subscribe to get further content like this throughout Final Fantasy preview season and beyond. And I'll be back later on this week with my picks for the best mythics, rares, uncommons, and commons from the set. Thanks. I'll see you in the next one.